The morning sun barely warmed the air as people hustled up the courthouse steps. A tall man with kind eyes checked his watch and nodded to himself, 15 minutes early. Perfect. He straightened his navy blue suit jacket and gripped his leather portfolio tighter. Inside that portfolio were pages of notes about a free legal help program he'd worked on for months. He took a deep breath before pushing through the heavy glass doors. The courthouse lobby buzzed with activity. Lawyers rushed past with coffee cups and briefcases. Court clerks carried stacks of folders. Regular folks sat on benches, some looking nervous, others just tired. The security checkpoint stood between him and his important meeting. 3 officers worked the station, checking IDs and waving people through the metal detectors. 2 of the lines moved quickly, but he noticed the middle line hadn't moved in several minutes. Next, called out the officer at the middle station, an older man with graying hair at his temples and a security badge that read Officer B. His face looked like stone as he motioned the well-dressed black man forward. ID, the officer said without looking up, his hand stretched out expectantly. The man handed over his driver's license. Good morning. I have a 9:30 appointment with Judge Williams. We're discussing the Neighborhood Legal Assistance Program. Officer B studied the ID much longer than he had for previous visitors. His eyes flicked from the photo to the man's face several times. The line behind them grew longer. Purpose of your visit? Officer B asked, though the man had just explained. I'm meeting with Judge Williams about the new pro bono program, he repeated patiently. I'm a bit early, but I was hoping to review my notes before we start. The officer handed back the ID with barely concealed reluctance. Then he did something strange. While everyone else had been directed to the waiting area inside, Officer B pointed toward the doors. You'll have to wait outside, he said flatly. Judge's orders. The man blinked in surprise. Outside? But I have a confirmed appointment. I said outside. Officer B repeated, raising his voice enough that several people turned to look. We'll call you when it's time. The man glanced around at the other security stations. A white woman in casual clothes had just been waved through. A white businessman with a rumpled suit was already putting his belt back on after clearing the metal detector. A young white couple was being directed to the elevator banks. Is there some kind of problem with my ID? The man asked quietly. No problem. Just following procedure. Officer B's eyes had already moved past him to the next person in line. Next. Confused but unwilling to cause a scene, the man stepped out of line. He watched as a court employee approached Officer B and whispered something. The officer glanced at the man, frowned, and shook his head. Back outside in the chilly morning air, the man stood tall despite the injustice of the situation. He'd faced this kind of treatment before. Law school, courtrooms, even shopping malls. The sting never really went away, but he'd learned to channel that feeling into determination. He watched through the glass doors as person after person entered without issue. After 20 minutes, he checked his phone. No messages about his appointment being cancelled or delayed. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. His meeting time came and went. An hour passed. From his spot near the bottom of the steps, he could see Officer B allow dozens of people inside. Some didn't even have appointments. His jaw tightened, but his expression remained calm. Today was too important to let one prejudiced guard derail everything. A young woman in a neatly pressed suit hurried past him, then stopped suddenly. She turned back, her face showing surprise. Excuse me, she said, aren't you the person here to see Judge Williams? About the community legal aid program. He nodded. Yes, that's me. She sent me to find you. Everyone's waiting upstairs. When you didn't show up, she got worried. I've been waiting out here for over an hour, he explained, his voice steady. The security officer wouldn't let me in. He said it was Judge's orders. The young woman's eyes widened. What? That doesn't make any sense. Judge Williams has been looking forward to this meeting all week. What happened next would leave the entire courthouse speechless. The young woman's face showed genuine confusion. Please, come with me right away, she said, motioning toward the courthouse doors. Judge Williams specifically asked me to find you when you didn't show up for the meeting. I've been standing here the whole time, the man explained as they walked back to the entrance. The security officer told me to wait outside, said it was Judge's orders. The woman shook her head. That's absolutely not true. The judge has been excited about this meeting for weeks. As they approached the security checkpoint again, Officer B was busy checking another person's ID. When he glanced up and saw the man returning with the young clerk, his expression hardened. "Sir, I told you to wait outside until," Officer B began. "This gentleman has an appointment with Judge Williams," the clerk interrupted firmly. "She sent me personally to find him. He's already late because he was told to wait outside." Officer B's face twitched slightly. There must have been some misunderstanding. "Let's clear it up then," the clerk replied. "He needs to come through now. The judge is waiting." The officer reluctantly waved them through, avoiding eye contact as the man placed his portfolio and phone in the plastic bin for screening. Walking through the courthouse hallways, the clerk whispered, "I'm so sorry about that. I don't understand why he would tell you to wait outside." The man just nodded. He understood perfectly well, but chose not to say so. "By the way," the clerk continued as they stepped into an elevator, "I didn't catch your name earlier." When he told her, her eyes widened in surprise. She looked at him more carefully, realization dawning on her face. "Wait, you're THA. Oh my goodness," she stammered. "You're the new state Supreme Court Justice." He smiled slightly and nodded. "I was appointed 3 weeks ago." The elevator seemed to freeze in that moment. The clerk's mouth opened and closed a few times before she found her words. "And Officer B made you wait outside? For an hour?" Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "Oh no. It happens more often than you might think," he replied quietly. The elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, revealing a busy hallway filled with attorneys and courthouse staff. A few people glanced their way, then did double takes as they recognized the man in the navy suit. Word spread like wildfire. Whispers followed them down the hallway. "Is that really him? The new Supreme Court Justice? What's he doing here? I heard security make him wait outside." At the end of the hallway, a conference room door opened, and an older woman in judicial robes stepped out, looking concerned. When she spotted the man walking toward her, relief washed over her face. "There you are. We were getting worried," she said, extending her hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person, Justice." The clerk, still flustered, blurted out, "Judge Williams, he was made to wait outside by security. Officer B told him it was your orders." Judge Williams froze. "My orders? I would never." Her expression shifted from confusion to horror. "You were kept waiting outside for an hour." "Unfortunately, yes," he replied calmly. The judge's face flushed with anger. "This is absolutely unacceptable. Please come inside. Everyone's waiting to hear about your program, but I think we need to address what just happened first." Inside the conference room sat 5 other people: the courthouse administrator, the county's chief public defender, 2 local community leaders, and the head of courthouse security. They all stood when the Supreme Court Justice entered. The room fell silent as Judge Williams explained the situation. The head of security's face darkened with each word. "Justice, I cannot begin to apologize enough," the security chief said. "Rest assured, this will be dealt with immediately." The man raised his hand slightly. "Before we move on, I'd like to suggest something." His voice was measured, thoughtful. "What happened today isn't just about me. If this is how a Supreme Court justice is treated, imagine how regular citizens are being treated every day." He placed his portfolio on the table and opened it, revealing meticulously organized papers about the community legal aid program. "The program we're here to discuss today aims to help people navigate a complex legal system that often feels unwelcoming," he continued. "What happened downstairs is exactly why this work matters so much." Everyone in the room leaned forward, hanging on his every word. What had started as a routine meeting was now transforming into something much more important, a moment of truth for the entire courthouse. And his next words would leave them all speechless. The conference room fell silent as the justice spoke. His calm voice carried weight that had nothing to do with his title. "What happened downstairs isn't just about me," he continued. "It's about every person who walks through those doors feeling unwelcome or afraid." He opened his leather portfolio wider, revealing newspaper clippings alongside his program notes. "Before I was appointed to the state Supreme Court, I spent 15 years as a public defender. I've seen countless clients treated poorly simply because of how they looked or where they came from. The courthouse administrator cleared his throat. Justice, we can assure you that what happened today is not our standard procedure. Officer B will be disciplined immediately. The justice shook his head slightly. Quick punishment won't solve the deeper problem. He pulled out a photograph from his portfolio, a much younger version of himself in a public defender's suit, standing on these same courthouse steps. 20 years ago, I came to this courthouse for my first case. I was wearing my best suit, the only one I owned at the time. The security guard made me wait outside that day too. Shocked glances shot around the table. Different guard, same problem, he said. When I finally got inside and met my client, he told me he'd been treated the same way 3 times before. He had lost faith in the justice system before his case even began. Judge Williams leaned forward. I had no idea this was happening in my courthouse. Most people in positions of power don't see it, the justice replied without accusation. That's why I wanted to come here personally today, not just send a representative. The head of security, a stern-looking woman who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. Justice, I would like to personally apologize. Would you be willing to tell us exactly what happened during your interaction with Officer B? Every detail matters. The justice recounted the morning's events simply and precisely, the extended ID check, the dismissive tone, the false claim about judge's orders, and the hour spent waiting while others were allowed inside. As he spoke, the young clerk who had found him outside nodded in confirmation. The security chief took detailed notes, her expression growing more troubled with each word. When he finished, she put her pen down. This is completely unacceptable. But I have a question, if I may. Why didn't you simply tell Officer B who you are? One word about being a Supreme Court justice would have changed everything instantly. A small smile crossed the justice's face. That's exactly the problem. Justice shouldn't depend on your title or status. The courthouse doors should be equally open to everyone, the Supreme Court justice and the person who cleans the courthouse at night. The public defender nodded vigorously. That's been my experience too. When I show up in a suit with my credentials visible, I'm treated one way. When I'm in casual clothes, it's completely different. Which brings me back to why I'm here, the justice said, turning back to his portfolio. He pulled out a detailed proposal with the words Community Access to Justice Initiative printed across the top. This program isn't just about providing free legal help. It's about changing how the courthouse feels to regular people who walk through those doors. The room was completely focused now, all thoughts of punishment for Officer B temporarily set aside. The program has 3 main parts, the justice explained. First, legal assistance for those who can't afford it. Second, a community education component so people understand their rights before they even enter the courthouse. And third, he paused, looking each person in the eye, a complete overhaul of how courthouse staff interact with the public. He laid out statistics showing how different treatment at courthouses led to different legal outcomes. The data revealed patterns that couldn't be explained by anything other than bias. When people are treated with dignity from the moment they enter, they're more likely to trust the process, more likely to follow court orders, and more likely to believe justice was served, even if they don't win their case. The courthouse administrator looked thoughtful. You're suggesting that what happened to you today is happening every day to people without the power to change it, the justice finished. But together, we can change it now. What he proposed next would transform not just this courthouse, but the entire state's approach to justice. And it all began because one officer made the wrong person wait outside. While the meeting continued upstairs, word spread through the courthouse like wildfire. Clerks whispered to attorneys. Security guards talked in hushed tones. By lunchtime, everyone knew the new state Supreme Court justice had been forced to wait outside for an hour. Back in the conference room, the justice finished presenting his program. His voice remained steady and passionate as he outlined his vision for a more welcoming justice system. This isn't just about posting signs that say equal justice under law, he explained. It's about making sure every person who walks through those doors actually experiences it. Judge Williams nodded thoughtfully. Your program addresses exactly what we need. But I'm still troubled by what happened this morning. We need to deal with Officer B immediately. The courthouse administrator agreed. He should be called up here right now to explain himself. The justice raised his hand slightly. Before we do that, may I suggest something different? I'd like to meet with him privately. Surprised looks passed between the others. The head of security frowned. With all due respect, Justice, that's not necessary. This is a clear violation of our policies and basic human decency. I understand, the justice replied. But I'm not interested in public humiliation. I'm interested in real change. After some discussion, they agreed to his request. The security chief stepped out to call Officer B upstairs. While they waited, the justice turned to Judge Williams. You know, when I was a young attorney, an older judge once told me something I never forgot. He said, "You'll never change a mind by embarrassing someone in front of their peers, but you might change a heart by talking to them one-on-one." Judge Williams smiled. Sounds like Judge Thompson. He was my mentor too. The door opened and Officer B stepped inside. The color drained from his face when he saw who was sitting at the table. His eyes darted to his boss, then to Judge Williams, and back to the justice. "You wanted to see me." His voice was barely audible. The justice stood up. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk privately. Would you mind joining me down the hall?" Looking confused and terrified, Officer B nodded stiffly. They walked to an empty jury room, the justice leading the way calmly while Courthouse staff stopped and stared as they passed. Inside the jury room, the justice closed the door and gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down." Officer B remained standing, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "Sir, Justice, I want to apologize. I didn't know who you were." The justice nodded slowly. "I know you didn't. And that's exactly what I want to talk about." He pulled out a chair and sat down, then waited until Officer B hesitantly did the same. "Do you know why I'm troubled by what happened this morning?" the justice asked. Officer B swallowed hard. "Because I was disrespectful to a Supreme Court justice." "No," the justice said quietly. "Because you shouldn't have to recognize someone's title to treat them with basic dignity." The officer looked down at his hands. "I've been a security officer for 18 years, he finally said. "I've seen all kinds of people come through those doors. Some are dangerous, some are trying to cause trouble." "And how do you decide who might be dangerous?" the justice asked, his voice still gentle. Officer B didn't answer. "Let me tell you something about myself," the justice continued. "Before I became a judge, I was a public defender. Before that, I grew up in the housing projects just 3 miles from this courthouse. My mother cleaned offices at night so I could go to college." He paused, letting his words sink in. "If you had seen me 20 years ago, in my second-hand suit that didn't quite fit, would you have made me wait outside too?" Officer B's face showed real pain now. "Probably," he admitted quietly. "And that's not right." The justice nodded. "The first step toward change is honesty. I appreciate yours." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to get you fired. I'm here because I believe people can learn and grow. But I need to know if you're willing to be part of the solution." Officer B looked up, genuine surprise on his face. "You're not asking for me to lose my job." "What would that solve?" the justice asked. "Another person would take your place, possibly with the same biases." "No, I'm asking for something harder. I'm asking you to help us change this courthouse from the inside out." For the first time, Officer B met the justice's eyes directly. In that moment, something shifted between them, not friendship exactly, but a fragile bridge of understanding. What happened next would surprise everyone in the courthouse, from the janitors to the judges, and it would start with the most unlikely person, Officer B himself. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with rumors. Everyone had heard about the incident, but no one knew what had happened in that private meeting between the justice and Officer B. Many expected the officer to be fired or at least suspended. So when Officer B showed up for his regular shift, people stared in disbelief. Even more surprising was his demeanor. Something about him seemed different. The usual hardness in his face had softened. He greeted each person who approached security with a polite good morning and made eye contact with everyone, regardless of how they looked or dressed. At 9:30 sharp, something unprecedented happened. Officer B asked his supervisor for permission to address the entire security team during their morning briefing. Curious and somewhat wary, the supervisor agreed. The break room fell silent as Officer B stood at the front. His hands trembled slightly as he looked at his colleagues. "I've worked here for 18 years, he began, his voice rough with emotion. "And yesterday, I made the biggest mistake of my career." He told them everything, how he'd made the justice wait outside, the false claim about judge's orders, and the private conversation afterward. "I've always told myself I was just being careful," he continued, "that I was protecting this courthouse. But yesterday, I had to face the truth. I wasn't making decisions based on real threats. I was making them based on," he paused, taking a deep breath, "based on what people looked like." The room remained completely silent. Some officers looked down uncomfortably. Others watched with surprised respect. The justice could have demanded my job. Instead, he asked me a question I couldn't answer. How do I decide who might be dangerous? The truth is, I've been using the wrong indicators all these years. Officer B pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The justice gave me this article about how our brains make snap judgments based on things that have nothing to do with actual threats. He asked me to read it and think about it. I stayed up all night doing just that. He looked around the room earnestly. I realized I'd been turning away people who needed help. People who had every right to be here. And I'm not the only one. A few officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The justice isn't asking for me to be punished. Instead, he's offering all of us something better. A chance to learn and do our jobs the right way. The supervisor, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "The justice is launching a new program for the whole courthouse. Part of it includes training for security staff about fair treatment." He asked if I would help develop it based on my experience. Murmurs spread through the room. This was the last thing anyone had expected. I said yes. Officer B continued. "And I'm asking all of you to join me. We're the first people visitors see when they enter. We set the tone for their entire courthouse experience." One of the younger officers raised his hand. "Why would the justice trust you with this after what happened?" Officer B nodded thoughtfully. I asked him the same question. He said something I'll never forget. "The people who recognize their mistakes are exactly the ones who should lead the change." The break room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, thoughtful rather than tense. After the briefing, Officer B returned to his post. Throughout the morning, he greeted each person with the same respectful attention. When a shabbily dressed man approached, clearly nervous about his court appearance, Officer B surprised everyone. "First time in court?" he asked kindly. The man nodded. "It can be confusing," Officer B said, pointing to a nearby desk. "We have court guides who can help you find your courtroom and explain the process. Would you like me to introduce you?" The man's relief was visible. "Yes, please." As Officer B escorted him to the help desk, other security officers watched with growing curiosity. By lunchtime, 2 of them had approached Officer B privately, asking how they could get involved with the justice's program. Meanwhile, upstairs in the administrative offices, the justice was meeting with Courthouse leadership about the next phase of his plan, one that would expand beyond this building to change courthouses across the entire state. And it had all started because one officer had made him wait outside. 3 weeks after the incident, the courthouse felt different. Small changes had begun to appear, like the new welcome desk in the lobby staffed by friendly volunteers, and clear signs in multiple languages explaining courthouse procedures. But the biggest changes were in how people treated each other. Officer B had surprised everyone by becoming the most dedicated supporter of the justice's program. He arrived early each day to review security protocols and suggest improvements. He spoke openly about his own journey of recognizing and addressing bias. Today was especially important. The justice was returning to the courthouse for the official launch of the Community Access to Justice initiative. All courthouse staff had been invited to attend the presentation in the main courtroom. By 10 a.m., the courtroom was packed. Judges sat in the front row alongside attorneys, clerks, security officers, and community members. Officer B sat near the back, still somewhat uncomfortable with all the attention. The courthouse administrator stepped up to the podium. "Thank you all for coming today. 3 weeks ago, an unfortunate incident happened in this building that could have ended very differently. Instead of anger and punishment, it led to one of the most important programs our courthouse has ever seen." He gestured toward the door. Please welcome back State Supreme Court Justice. Everyone stood as the justice entered. He walked confidently to the front of the room, nodding warmly to people along the way. When he reached the podium, he shook the administrator's hand and turned to face the crowd. "Please, everyone, sit down," he said with a smile. "We have a lot to talk about today, and I want us all to be comfortable." As everyone settled, the justice looked around the room thoughtfully. "When I was a young boy," he began, "my grandmother took me to a courthouse much like this one. She needed to file some papers about our apartment building, which had serious safety problems. We waited outside in the rain for nearly an hour before someone told us we were at the wrong entrance." He paused, his eyes finding Officer B in the crowd. "That day taught me something important. A courthouse isn't just a building, it's an experience. And for too many people, that experience says, you don't belong here." Heads nodded throughout the room. 3 weeks ago, when I was asked to wait outside these doors, I could have gotten angry. I could have demanded someone be fired. But what would that have solved? He gestured around the courtroom. "Look at what we've accomplished instead. In just 3 weeks, reported incidents of discourteous treatment are down by 40%. Community members report feeling more welcome, and applications for our free legal assistance program have doubled." The justice stepped away from the podium and walked closer to the audience. "But the most remarkable change came from someone I never expected," he said. "Officer B, would you mind standing up?" All eyes turned to the back of the room where Officer B reluctantly stood, his face flushed with embarrassment. This officer could have lost his job because of how he treated me. Instead, he's become the most dedicated advocate for change in this courthouse. He's developed new training materials for security staff. He's volunteered extra hours to help visitors navigate the building. And yesterday, he submitted a detailed proposal to improve security procedures without creating barriers for the public." Officer B looked down, unused to praise. "This is what real change looks like," the justice continued. "Not punishment but growth, not shame but understanding." He returned to the podium and opened a folder. "Today, I'm pleased to announce that the State Supreme Court has unanimously approved funding for our program to expand to every courthouse in the state. Each location will implement the changes we've developed here, adapted to their unique needs." The room erupted in applause. Judge Williams wiped away a tear. "But there's one more announcement," the justice said when the room quieted. "A special position has been created to oversee this statewide implementation. We needed someone who truly understands both security concerns and the importance of respectful treatment." He looked directly at Officer B. "And I can think of no one better qualified than the person who started this journey with me 3 weeks ago. Officer B, would you accept this position?" The room fell silent. Officer B stood frozen in shock. This wasn't just a second chance, it was an opportunity to transform his biggest mistake into his life's most meaningful work. His response would change everything, not just for him, but for thousands of people seeking justice throughout the state. Officer B stood in shocked silence as every eye in the courtroom turned to him. The offer hung in the air, a chance to lead the very program that had grown from his mistake. His throat felt dry as he finally found his voice. I don't know what to say," he managed. The justice smiled warmly. "You don't need to decide right now, but I hope you'll consider it." After the presentation ended, people gathered in small groups, talking excitedly about the program. Officer B stood alone by the window, still trying to process what had happened. A hand touched his shoulder gently. It was the justice. "Walk with me," he said quietly. They moved through the courthouse hallways, past curious onlookers and whispered conversations. "I understand if you're hesitant," the justice said as they walked. "It's a big change from what you've been doing." Officer B nodded. "To be honest, I'm not sure I deserve it. 3 weeks ago, I was part of the problem." "And that's exactly why you're the right person for this job," the justice replied. "You understand both sides now. You know what needs to change because you've changed yourself." They stopped near a large window overlooking the city. "Let me tell you a story," the justice continued. "When I was first appointed as a judge, I made a terrible mistake in one of my early cases. I misunderstood a key piece of evidence and made a ruling that hurt an innocent family." Officer B looked surprised. The justice rarely spoke about personal failures. When I realized my mistake, I was devastated. I almost resigned. But my mentor told me something I never forgot. The best judges aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who learn from them and make sure others don't repeat them. Officer B gazed out at the city below. I've worked security for 18 years, he said slowly. It's all I know. What you know is people, the justice countered. You understand safety concerns, procedure, training. But now you also understand something more valuable, how it feels when the system treats someone unfairly. 6 months later, the courthouse looked remarkably different. A new welcome center greeted visitors in the lobby. Security officers received ongoing training about respectful treatment. Free legal help was available to anyone who needed it. And at the center of it all was Officer B, though he wasn't called that anymore. As program director, he traveled to courthouses across the state, sharing his story and implementing changes. The hard lines in his face had softened. His eyes, once suspicious, now looked for ways to help. On a crisp autumn morning, the justice returned to the courthouse for a follow-up visit. The lobby was busy as usual, but the atmosphere felt completely different. People moved with purpose but without fear. Security was thorough but respectful. The program director spotted the justice entering and hurried over with a smile. "Welcome back," he said, extending his hand. "You're just in time for our morning briefing. Would you like to join us?" The justice nodded, and they walked together to the conference room where courthouse staff from every department gathered. The program director took his place at the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone," he began confidently. "Today marks 6 months since we started this program. I'd like to share some numbers with you." He displayed a chart showing dramatic improvements, complaints down 70%, public satisfaction up 65%, and most importantly, case outcomes showing more consistent results regardless of race or income. "But the real success isn't in these numbers," he continued. "It's in the stories we hear every day from people who feel they've been treated with dignity, maybe for the first time in a courthouse." He gestured to the justice. None of this would have happened if not for what occurred 6 months ago. One incident that could have ended with anger instead became the spark for real change. The justice stood and looked around the room with genuine appreciation. "The credit belongs to all of you, especially to our program director who had the courage to admit a mistake and then work tirelessly to fix not just that mistake, but an entire system." As the meeting ended, a young woman approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to thank you both. My grandmother has a case here today. She was so scared to come. She had a terrible experience at a courthouse years ago. But everyone has been so helpful. She actually smiled when we walked in." The justice and program director exchanged a look of quiet satisfaction. This was why they did the work. What had started with one black man being made to wait outside had transformed into something that would help thousands. And it all began because someone had the courage to turn a moment of injustice into an opportunity for lasting change.